everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Congressman Glenn Ivey. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Congressman, this week during a town hall, you were met with applause when you floated the idea that it may be time for Senate Democrats to pick new leadership as we move forward. And this came after Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer made a 180. He voted to support the continuing resolution along with a handful of Democrats in the Senate. House Democrats, however, were united almost in voting against it. Every single one except for one voted against it. Were you blindsided by Chuck Schumer's decision? Talk to us about your comments here.
Yeah, I think we were caught by surprise. We being House Democrats, as you mentioned, Hakeem Jeffries is the leader for House Democrats, and he rallied us. I think it was 213 out of 214, all voted together to block the spending bill that the Trump administration was trying to push through. And the expectation was that we'd get similar support in the Senate. In fact, Senator Schumer, who was the Senate Democratic leader, had announced that they were going to vote against the spending bill, just as we had. He flip-flopped the next day and brought some other Senate Democrats with him, just enough to pass the cloture hurdle, and then the bill passed. So we were deeply disappointed and shocked by what had happened there. And, I went home and started talking to people in my district. They were disappointed and upset, to say the least. And, I've got tens of thousands of government employees in my district. And I think they knew that this was going to be one of our few chances to try and block what the Trump administration's doing as far as attacking government employees and government service. And so they were deeply disappointed too.
And you're not the only House Democrat to publicly say this. Just in my conversations alone since last week, I had Congressman Barra as well as Congressman Seth Moulton express their disappointment with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer as well. But Schumer defended his decision by saying, hey, I had two horrible choices and keeping the government open was better than shutting it down. And then in that case, President Trump as well as Elon Musk would have full reign to do whatever they want. Those guardrails would be loosened. Do you think shutting down the government was the better idea?
Yeah, I think the way it actually would have played out is the government might have shut down for a day or two. But one of the things that the House Democrats did, and we encouraged the Senate Democrats to do, was to offer a counterproposal of a 30-day pushback. Give us 30 additional days to keep working on this and see if we can reach an agreement. In fact, most of these continuing resolutions are exactly that. They're like 1 or 2 pages long. It strikes one date. In this instance, it would have been, I think, March 14th, and it adds something 30 days or 60 days down the road so you can continue to work. Instead of doing that, though, this bill was about 100 pages long, and it had, I called it a Trojan horse. It had all kinds of things in there that I thought undermined our position as Democrats, cuts and the like. But the big challenge, I think, is that because it doesn't have the level of detail that a full spending bill would have, it actually gives President Trump a lot more discretion than presidents typically have to move money, in this instance, in my concern, from, say, blue states to red states, from programs that Democrats want to programs that Republicans want. So it can have a multi-billion-dollar impact on that front. And then the last point is, I don't really know that it would have given Doge, Musk, or Trump any more power to do more than what they've been doing already as far as the assault on government employees. And the important caveat on that front is we're winning very well in the courts right now. I think over 120 suits have been filed. There's about 40 injunctions that are in place. The vast majority, I think all but maybe 3 or 4, are ruling in favor of the government employees and either freezing the termination of these employees and in some instances ordering the Trump administration to reinstate them. So I don't know that a government shutdown would have changed those rights. In fact, I think those legal rights stay in place even when there is a government shutdown. And those are the legal rights that the courts are using to force the Trump administration to reinstate these employees. So I disagreed with Senator Schumer's analysis, but at the end of the day, we can have reasonable disagreements on that front. Just tell us up front, if you want to take a different direction, don't wait until all these folks have cast these votes on the House side. These were very tough votes for some of our House Democratic members. Don't change your mind after the vote's been cast. Do it up front. Move in coordination. Make sure there's communication between yourself, Mr. Schumer, and Mr. Jeffries. And I think we'll avoid these kinds of missteps in the future.
And that's a really interesting point, because you've said before you believe Hakeem Jeffries met the moment. You believe Senator Schumer did not. And as you mentioned, Democrats have a disadvantage right now in the House and Senate. And this was one of the areas that they could have flexed their muscle here and used this as leverage. And because the government didn't shut down, that opportunity was lost. So I know that you received some applause when you floated the idea of Senate Democrats getting new leadership. Hakeem Jeffries said that, next question, when asked about the leadership there, he eventually did say this week that he believes Schumer should remain leader. What do you think? If you think that there needs to be new leadership in Senate Democrats, who do you think meets the moment there?
Well, yeah, I'm in the House. That would be up to the senators to make that decision. But the bottom line for me is not so much who the Democratic leader is, it's what he or she does. And so, Chuck Schumer, outstanding public servant, he's had a long and great career. I'm not necessarily trying to force him out personally. This isn't a personal, vendetta against him. It is a request, really a demand, I think, to be reasonable about it and honest about it. Act in coordination with your House Democratic colleagues. Don't pull the rug out from under us like that. And I do think his analysis was wrong, so I disagree on that front. But at a minimum, we should be able to make sure we're moving forward in a coordinated way. And that just takes basic communication to do it.
I think that's a really interesting point once again, because ever since November, really, there have been headlines, Democrats in disarray. Do the Democrats have an identity crisis? How do Democrats move forward? Is it going more progressive? Is it going more towards the center? What is that unified message you want to see going forward between the House, between the Senate?
Yeah, the irony there is that, if you look at the House vote, as we just discussed a minute ago, we had liberal House Democrats, conservative House Democrats, and everybody in between all moving together in lockstep. So, Democrats in disarray, that's not the description that fits what happened last Tuesday with what Hakeem Jeffries did. The problem was really that the Senate, or really Senator Schumer, decided to move in a different direction, sort of at the 11th hour, and after House Democrats had already cast their votes. So, and from a messaging standpoint, I think everybody's on the same page there. The things that the Trump administration is doing, I think everybody disagrees with, and not just Democrats. House Republicans are starting to get earfuls when they go home and talk to their constituents too, because he's talking about cutting Medicaid, which, tens of millions of people in the United States rely on Medicaid, including in red states, including in rural areas. There are rural hospitals that might have to shut down based on those kinds of cuts. There are children and seniors who are not going to get medical coverage based on the cuts they're proposing. And the cuts they're proposing are $900 billion or so, plus or minus. So that's very significant. There's also concerns coming out of red states as well about these government employee cuts. Most of the government employees are across the country. 80% are outside the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And so there are people in, states all over that are now, oh, what do you mean that my park's going to have to shut down? What do you mean my local Social Security office isn't going to be able to open or have reasonable hours? What do you mean my Veterans Affairs office or my VA hospital might have reduced hours? They're starting to see those kinds of impacts. They're starting to get concerned. And that's why they're starting to voice those concerns to Republicans in the House and the Senate. And that's why the House has stopped having town hall meetings. At least the House Republicans have been, it's been suggested by the leadership to not have town hall meetings anymore so that they can avoid that sort of pushback.
And to your point, you're saying, hey, all of the House Democrats, aside from one, progressive, moderate, centrist, everyone in between, we voted in lockstep. We're good. I'm curious what you think about the future of the Democratic Party and its favorability, because A new poll says that the favorability of the left hit an all-time historic low at 27%. What's the future of the Democratic Party, especially when you're thinking about midterms in less than 2 years? How do you right that ship?
Well, if you look at the comparisons, and remember, these are just generic polls, Democrats are actually polling ahead of Republicans in generic polls that I've seen, especially with respect to the House of Representatives. And Trump is underwater already. You know, his honeymoon is over, basically, because people are saying the crazy things he's doing, say with tariffs, for example, totally erratic, totally damaging. He promised he was going to help people put money in their pockets, help them economically. But these tariffs he's talking about would do the exact opposite. And we just talked about what the Medicaid impact could be, especially on low income and working class families. So I think we're actually going to fare pretty well if we stay on this track. And if he continues to do these, kind of crazy policies. And I think in addition to that, the Democrats are going to start pushing out alternatives to the stuff he's talking about. So, we got to move away from the government of chaos and revenge, which is what he's been doing in a lot of the steps he's taken, and talk again about, well, what's going to help the regular people here in the United States? How are we going to help everyday people get more money in their pockets, keep a roof over their heads, pay for gas and groceries, and bring those prices down and get more jobs back in their communities? That's what people want us to focus on. That's not what he's been doing, sadly. But I think if we stay on this track, we'll take the House back, and we'll be back in the majority again come to 2026.
Congressman, per usual, I appreciate our conversations. I appreciate your perspective as always. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks for having me, and you have a great one. We appreciate the great work that you all do.